Hello and welcome back to Movie Husbands. Today we're reviewing The Many Saints of Newark. The Many Saints of Newark serves as a prequel to The Sopranos and introduces us to Dickie Moltisanti, young Tony Soprano, and many characters from the series. Directed by Alan Taylor and written by series creator David Chase, the film stars Vera Farmiga, Alessandro Nivola, Michael Gandolfini, Ray Liotta, and many others. All right, Jeffrey, so before we begin this review, I know, we've both seen The Sopranos, so I think it's probably good that we talk about, our relationship to The Sopranos, and then we could kind of go into the movie and discuss that.
Yeah, I think there's no beating around the bush with The Sopranos. I think that this is just my opinion, not like it's the only opinion, or I'm the only person saying this, but I think that The Sopranos has such a tremendous kind of psychological realism about it that's just been completely unmatched by television since then. That's not to say that we haven't had extraordinary and life-changing TV since The Sopranos aired, but what The Sopranos was doing, even aside from how inventive it was for the time and how it really changed television, was something that I think has been unequaled since then. Just the sense of, again, psychological realism, the kind of literary quality it has about its themes, like how deeply thematic it is, how funny it is, how heavy it is at times. There's so much going on in that show, and there's never like a guiding moral center that tells you exactly what to think. It's written in a way that all of these characters are essentially delusional. They're like people that you and I know. They're like ourselves. We're in our own worlds, and they're have this delusional sense of self that they're constantly just projecting on everyone else around them. And all of these people are just kind of bumping into one another against these projections of who they think they are versus who they actually are.
I like to say, sorry to interrupt, I like to say it's kind of like a fake flirtation with morality that all these characters have.
Yeah, there's a scene, I think, in the therapy office where Tony says, I'm basically a good guy. And he is not. But that show, the reason I love it so much, even a show that's as tremendous as Mad Men, I have nothing bad to say about Mad Men, but there's always a guiding hand, there's always a moral center that's telling you what to feel and what to think, as much as there's tremendous craftsmanship on display.
Yeah, I don't think I could put it any better than you put it. I mean, in terms of my experience with The Sopranos, I was much later to the series. You and I first watched it just a couple years ago. Well, you rewatched it. I watched it for the first time. But I agree with everything that you said about, its themes and its characters and the development. And I think, tying into this movie had a tough time validating why it existed for me. And I think the trouble was all those things that made the show great, kind of these moral dilemmas, these fake moral dilemmas, and the characters and how they relate to each other. I think lots of that was just kind of missing or just felt kind of bland in this movie. It was a little disappointing, to be honest.
I agree. I'm also pretty disappointed in this movie. I don't think it's by any means a disaster. I think it's pretty competently made. There's times where you can tell that they're going for something, even if they don't quite get there, but they're simply just biting off more than they can chew. There's 3 stories going all together. We don't really get a great sense of any of them. A lot of what we talked about that we like so much about The Sopranos is really not here at all. And even we could blame this on it being a film, that they simply don't have the time to develop these things the way that the series did, and that's true. But say if I take the first 2 episodes of The Sopranos and call that a movie, there's far more psychological depth and far more thematic depth in those 2 episodes than there is in these 2 hours.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And just tying a little bit into what this movie is about and who it follows, it basically follows Dickie Moltisanti, which is Christopher's dad from the original series. That's basically the main character of this movie, and you have a plethora of other characters surrounding. You have young Tony, young Janice, you have Christopher Moltisanti as a baby, you have Tony's parents.
Young Silvio for some reason.
But basically, the heft of this weight falls on Dickie Moltisanti's character. And the problem with that is that his character is unfortunately not compelling enough for me to carry this movie. There's this big thing that's kind of made of his character and his relationship with Tony, but there isn't enough of that in the movie, I think, to kind of drive, especially towards the end, when there's more young Tony, and they're having this, back and forth relationship that kind of evolves and grows, but there's not enough in the movie earlier on to validate what we're seeing towards the end.
I agree. Most of that relationship is explored in like the final 40 minutes. And actually, I think that's when the movie is at its most interesting, is those final 40 minutes. And then it kind of just ends. I agree with you that, especially for the sense of Dickie Moltisanti is kind of a ghost and like this kind of legendary figure over the series that is a very compelling figure, having not seen him in the series, that doesn't quite match up to what we're seeing in the film. I really thought that he would be a lot more interesting. I think that there's scenes that I really should have felt something where I didn't. There's a scene on the beach towards the end that should have been a great, horrifying Sopranos moment, but I ended up not feeling much at all because I'm not really sure what motivates these characters at the end of the day, which is certainly something I never felt about the series at all.
Yeah, there's just not enough explanation or backstory. And I think it was too bogged down alluding to all these characters that were from the series.
Yeah, so this actually gets to, I think, the main issue with the movie is I think that it wants to be a Sopranos prequel, and it also wants to be its own story, and it can't do both at once. And what's interesting is I think the more compelling aspects of the movie end up being the Sopranos prequel aspect of it, which I would not have thought going into this. You know, going into this, I would say, oh, David Chase is finally making something again. And in order for him to make another film, it has to be a Sopranos prequel, but he insists that he's telling an interesting story here that's only loosely tied to the Sopranos. And to some degree, that's true. But again, what's most compelling, I think, is probably, Michael Gandolfini's performance and also Vera Farmiga's performance. They have a couple really good scenes together. I think seeing Tony kind of reframed as an angsty teenager actually rather works for where Tony ends up in the series. But this film spends a whole lot of time not at those places. So you end up kind of waiting for Michael Gandolfini to show up again to feel compelling. And you're right, Dickie just never really holds the scene quite well. I do think some of the actors are doing really great work here. I think we disagree about this a little bit, but I really liked Ray Liotta's performance. I thought he brought really the only moral heft or moral thematics that this film engages with at all.
When we had that conversation, I'm not really referring to those scenes not being good. I'm just not sure that they helped develop the story I was hoping to see. I thought that it was kind of a distraction. I think they did work, though. In theory, I just don't know if it just tied enough to the rest of the movie to make it impactful enough for me.
The thing is, and maybe this film was just always going to be unsuccessful because we're comparing it to the series, but the series is constantly wrestling with ideas, like almost to its detriment at times. Like at times it can be so overwhelmingly philosophical and sometimes so frustratingly cynical that I don't really see that in this film. Like I don't see them really wrestling with the same things at all, that I'm shocked that it's even part of the same mythology. So in the opening scene of the show, when he first goes to Dr. Melfi's office, he talks about how he has this feeling that he came in at the end, and that everything good is behind him and there's nothing to look forward to. Since The Sopranos always seems like it's anti-nostalgia, I thought the point of this movie was going to be that there never was good times. We just look back on it with rose-colored glasses, because that is such a... What?
No, you just like blew my mind. I was just like, oh my God, that would have made such a good movie.
Yeah, because think about where the series ends. Nothing good happens to anybody. It is like one of the most dismal endings, and I'm not just talking about the very last scene, I'm talking about the final stretch. Everyone like we know and love is in a very bad position at the end of the show, and we don't feel that at all. And you could use that weight of where people end up to make us feel something in the prequel that this movie just does not do.
That's such a good story. I'm sorry, that like, in my head, like I'm thinking about that, like telling that kind of story.
Sometimes a film or a TV show will have a flashback, and your knowledge of what happens after makes it so emotional. Like maybe it's a kind of a family moment or a moment where people are really in love, but later that it doesn't work out. It makes the tragedy so much more so. The film's not really using our knowledge of the series to any great kind of thematic worth here. It's mostly just calling out people's names and, the caricature of Silvio and, oh, Carmela. It doesn't seem to have the same intentions the show has.
Yeah, and he Silvio did have the Silvio walk. Like the way he walks towards the door was spot on.
Yeah.
But no, I completely agree with you. I think what's interesting is if they wanted to focus mostly on Dickie Moltisanti and kind of leave young Tony out of it, I think that's fine and it should do it as a movie, but it has to make it compelling enough for you to be interested in it. And kind of going from there is I didn't really find much in terms of its themes of, it's kind of hard searching for those themes. Like, what is this movie about? What is it trying to say? What is the relevance of it? And I was kind of digging, and I know I talked to you about this earlier a little bit. It's just like, I don't know what it's trying to say or what it's trying to be.
I don't think we talked about anything good. So there are some good parts. I know we mentioned that the actors are good. There's a really good scene in the kitchen between Vera Farmiga and Michael Gandolfini that I think is really good. There's a couple of decent action scenes. Oh, we didn't talk at all about Leslie Odom Jr., who I think...
fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, I think really underused in the movie. I think that was a pretty interesting storyline that just didn't get its due, and also maybe kind of retroactively apologizing for how The Sopranos treats race, which it never treated all that well in the series.
And just to jump off that, because I was thinking of that earlier too, is that this movie does kind of have a theme that's built around race a little bit, and there's a huge storyline that kind of follows the movie. But the problem with that is that they don't spend enough time, just like they don't spend enough time on Dickie's relationship to young Tony or Dickie's life himself and his drives. The time that they spend on race is very surface level. Mm-hmm. There's nothing really deep or connective about it. Even though all the actors are great and I see that it's trying to tell something there, I just find it to be very bland and very kind of just surface level.
Oh, and there is a music cue at the end of the film. The music that this movie has its closing credits to is so annoying. And I'm sorry to be so severe about it, but it is so fan servicey, I could not deal with it. Sorry. I had to get that out.
I didn't mind it that much.
It really bothered me.
All right, so you ready to go to grades?
Yes. I give this a C. So I have lightened up a little bit on it since we first saw it. I know we first saw it, I was rather harsh. I had kind of a visceral reaction to it. In the days since, I've thought about it a little bit more. I think there are some redeeming qualities. I think ultimately, if you were interested in the characterization and the themes of the series, I'm not sure you're going to find too much here.
Yeah, I'm pretty much right there with you. I give this movie a C-. I do think, the troubles with kind of like thematics and story and character development, I think just lots of those things were missing from this movie, which was kind of disappointing. A lot of things that I found to like in The Sopranos were just missing from here. That being said, I do think the actors did a wonderful job here with the material that they had. I do love Tony's relationship to his mom. I know you had mentioned that briefly earlier. I think that was one of the highlights of the movie, and I wish they had expanded on that more, just like I wish they expanded on his relationship to Dickie more. And not that the movie had to be more about Tony, but, I kind of feel like the stuff with Tony worked so well in the movie that I wish they had done more of it because it was the one thing that was actually working well.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, and that's it for our review of The Many Saints of Newark. The Many Saints of Newark is now streaming on HBO Max and in theaters, so go check it out. If you have seen the movie, let us know in the comments what you thought of the movie, and we'll see you next time.